The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Along with my good friend, Keefer, we do a show called Keefer and Kurre here on Tony Kurre Radio. You can hear the show at least 5 days a week. I say at least because sometimes we've got time to air it actually more times, and sometimes people will call me and go, listen, I really love this show. You air it 5 times a week. We do that so people get a chance to hear it at least once. And sometimes we have musical elemented shows too where you have to listen to our app because you can't get it on Spotify anymore. And so we'll air it even more. And then, of course, it goes up to our podcast. And so you can listen to our podcast wherever. And it's funny because you and I, we do television shows together on ABC 3340, and we've done a lot of different things together. And it's just amazing. The topical stuff we talk about comes up a lot in conversation. And so we talk a lot of music here. And I had to mention this because I was on Fox 6 earlier this morning. The rock and roll induction came down late last night and up for grabs. These were the bands that were up for induction in the 2025 class: Bad Company, Chubby Checker, Oasis, Black Crowes, Billy Idol, Fish, Mana, Mariah Carey, White Stripes, Soundgarden, Outkast, Cyndi Lauper, and Joe Cocker. Out of that bunch, we've got 7 that made it.
Wow.
Bad Company, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Cyndi Lauper, Outkast, Soundgarden, and White Stripes. And then as a musical influence, Salt and Peppa made it in, as well as Warren Zevon, who also got it in, which he would not have made it in as a solo artist. Despite his influence in music and despite the fact that he's known as a very cantankerous individual. Oasis didn't make it. Black Crowes didn't make it. Billy Idol, who just released an album last week, didn't make it. Fish and Mariah Carey, who undoubtedly will make it. She owns more Grammys than anybody in the world. She'll make it in. It was her first year. I mentioned this to someone before. The Beatles didn't make it into their 3rd year. Okay. So crazy. And we know they're going to make it in, but when you're sitting there going, okay, it's like making out an invitee list to your wedding. You know which ones are going to get in. You're like, okay, they're going to get in. Let's just put them on the side for right now because they're going to make it. They're going to make it in. We don't even need to send them an invite. It's like you send an invite to your dad. I mean, you don't have to do that. He's going to make it in. So I thought it was really interesting. So as we do every time we do, and by the way, November 8th is when they're going to have the induction ceremonies. What's the really cool thing is they'll have, for example, and I went back to see Jackson Brown, who's one of your favorites, was inducted in 2004. Do you remember who inducted him into the Hall of Fame?
I don't remember. No,
that would be one Bruce Springsteen that actually brought him in. So
yeah.
So not only do
That's
you
great.
look at the artist who's being inducted in, but you look at the people that are inducting him in, and that's kind of like your best man. It's kind of like, I mean, how cool is that to be Jackson Brown? Then they have Bruce flipping Springsteen induct you, and I mean that just tells you just how huge and how important you were. But I was going through, and you and I had talked about this. About the ones who didn't get in. Bad Company was certainly one of those ones. He is the Kenny Stabler of rock and roll. They weren't going to allow him to get in while he was alive. Everyone knew that Kenny Stabler should have been in the Hall of Fame, but he had to pay his dues. And the minute I firmly believe that Pete Rose will be in the Baseball Hall of Fame within the next 2 or 3 years. It's going to happen.
No question.
They did not want him to be in while he was alive. They did not want him to appreciate that. And it's sad, but he's already in the Hall of Fame. There's a whole section donated, to Pete. You've mentioned that. And so Bad Company was that, who was that gal that was on the soap opera who got nominated like 19 years in a row and never won an
Susan
Emmy?
Lucci.
So it's the Bad Company was a Susan Lucci of rock and roll. And they've been up for a nomination since 1999. The only thing, and I'll start with this first question. The only thing you have to do is to have an album that's at least 25 years old. So if you have your first album in 2001, I just use one as an example. Blake Shelton of all people, his first album came out in 2001. He is now eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I did not know that was one of the criteria. How
that's
about
the
that?
only criteria.
Oh, okay. Wow.
The only criteria. The only, and I was talking to Mike Deverly this morning. He's like, wait a minute, you don't have to sell millions out. No, all you have to do is have one album that's at least 25 years old and you are eligible for the Hall of Fame. First of all, do you like that idea? I mean, it's wide open, man. It's wide open. Of course, they had a list of all these artists that came out with their first albums in 2001. I didn't know 99% of them. I have no clue who some of these people are. But for Bad Company to be on the cusp there since 1999 and not actually be into the smaller realm of inductees and then finally get in, everyone's like, okay, this better be the year. Simon Kirke, who of course played with Bad Company, is still alive, suffered a massive stroke back in 2016. Several years ago said, I don't give a damn about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I could give a rat's ass. He said, it's like going to a fucking mall, is what he said. He said, it's just like this guy, like going to a fucking mall. He said, I'd rather be in a mall than be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I could give a rat's ass. Now, of course, when you get dominated and you're in, all of a sudden, you know, Paul Rodgers comes out this morning and says, man, I'm totally amazed and honored to be in the Hall of Fame along with my bandmates. Of course, there was a guy named Brian Howell who also passed away back in 2020 that took over for Paul Rodgers. They actually had more commercial success with Brian as their lead singer than they did with Paul, but everyone knows Paul as well. But Paul also did The Firm, and of course he did Free, All Right Now. He could definitely be in as a solo artist. So I just want to talk a little bit about that and about some of the rock and roll. First of all, do you like the idea that all you got to do to get in is just have an album that's 25 years old? I love that.
Yeah, I think I did not. You've enhanced my knowledge with that nugget of information. I think that's a great starting point to truly make it a Hall of Fame kind of thing, because I think sometimes the rush to put people in, they're, like you said, are inevitable anyway, costs people that are deserving maybe not getting in when they should. So, I like that criteria, because you've also, we know we've talked at length on this show about when we get into talking about music and artists, so many of them, that criteria is really good to me, because so many tragedies happen and people's careers get shortened, or as people die in accidents or different things that, you know, if you had like a lot of like to Mike's follow-up question, if it was required on tons of album sales and lifetime achievement, that might cheat some people that were truly gifted and qualified for this honor out of being recognized. So I love it that it's that loose. I think that's a great starting point. Yeah, and I think
they always have the Grammys have it, the Emmys have it. They have that lifetime achievement thing, or they have musical influence awards. So somehow they can get you on, but it does mean a whole lot. And the other thing I thought was interesting, and we've thrown this around in the world of sports forever. What's more important, to get an MVP award or to win a championship that year?
Yeah.
There are some people that and it's usually most people will sit there and say, oh yeah, I won a championship, but forget the MVP. But listen, when it comes down to the bottom line, you always want to outperform the people around you, my friend. I know when I was in radio, for a radio station, I didn't give a shit about the radio station. I cared about my 3 to 7 spot on Tony Kurre Radio. And I knew that if I was outperforming the rest of everyone around me, that I was going to make the radio station better. And therefore, if we won something like Station of the Year or something, that's wonderful. But I knew that's how I was going to make my money. So I made sure that I was always 2 and 3 shares better than the midday gal and better than the guy at night. I was trying to beat everybody, including the people that were in my own building. And so I always wondered to myself, what would be more important, do you think, to a rock and roller? We should get Damon Johnson on to talk about this. It'd be a fascinating question. Would you rather win a Grammy, or would you rather be in the Hall of Fame? Or would you rather? Yeah, that's a great. Would you rather win an MVP? I mean, what would be important to you?
Well, I mean, the context is in play here, because if you are the greatest player and it makes your team successful, that's the mother load. Mm-hmm. If you're selfish and your team suffers because of it, because you don't get the other guys involved, and you have a career year, and I'm talking about sports, but even in music, you have these people that have left bands and gone solo, and it's really enhanced their career. I think that the team concept in sports is probably a little more significant than your bandmates because that is your team. But I think the thing to aspire to is to be as great as you can possibly be. And if you're recognized individually, that's fantastic. But if you make your team or your band truly on another level because of your supreme talent and effort and work ethic, then I think that's the ultimate.
It's hard to compare the two because, I was talking to Bruce Ayers out of the Comedy Club Stardom, and I was asking him how competitive comedians are.
Oh, yeah.
And whenever you see a comedian on stage, the comedians that's coming up next usually laugh at their material, even if it's not funny. They're there to support them, because they want those headliners to obviously reap the benefits of all the hard work, but they want these people that come in there as their A's and B's. They're when they're opening the shows. They want them to be funny too because they want to set the crowd. They want the crowd to feel that laughter inside them. And it really sucks when you're a headliner and you got someone opening up that just sucks, and can't get a laugh. I've been there, done it because I've been that opener. I've actually ruined a couple of shows for some guys. But I was asking about how competitive it was, and he goes, it's funny because everyone wants to see. Everyone wants to see everyone do well, but everyone wants to be a headliner. That's where you make the money. You don't make any money being the first or second guy. You make the money being the third guy, being the headliner. Sure. And if that means, ruining another guy's act or heckling another guy just so you can be a headliner. And so when it comes to music, I don't feel that competitive edge there. Like I don't think when Michael Jackson came out with Thriller that he thought to himself, hey, listen, this is going to be the best-selling album of all time, and I can hang my hat on that. I think for the most part, and Jackson Browne is a prime example of this, they write music that they truly love, and if it turns into a hit, fine, but if it doesn't, it's okay. Now, there's a lot of, because of the music labels and because of the music industry you live in, it don't work out that way. We've heard plenty of stories where, and I can remember, I forget the singer with the guy with the raspberries was or maybe it was Hermits was offered the idea to come back and write a song for a sitcom in the 70s. That sitcom was Welcome Back, Kotter. And basically said, listen, we need a song. It doesn't necessarily be a hit, but we need a song that can play along with this thing, these hogheads and these guys. And he wrote the song in the middle of about 25-minute flight and said the minute I wrote it, I knew it was going to be a number one hit. And it was just one of those things where it just came. So sometimes I think there are a few people. I think Billy Joel's one of them. I think Michael Jackson was one of them. I think Prince could have been one of them, where you say, listen, I need a hit record. And they could write you a hit record, but it may not be something they like particularly. So if you could write a hit record and you love the music you're doing, and there's been all kinds of bios on Whitney Houston. She sang a lot of music that she did not write. And because of that, she wasn't looked upon as, she's a great singer and a wonderful performer. And she left us way too early, but because she didn't write her own stuff, she was singing things that weren't quite, frankly, where she was in her life. And she couldn't have put as much into it as she possibly could have. And because of that, and there's one band, Three Dog Night, that's on the list. And I want to go through a list of bands that aren't in the Hall of Fame. And I want to get your thoughts on each and every one of them. But Three Dog Night's one of those bands that at one point was outselling the Beatles. Three Dog Night was going around. You go back and just pull up a bio on Three Dog Night in the 70s and 80s or early 80s. They were outselling the Beatles ticket for ticket. They were doing great, but they never wrote any of their own music. And because they didn't write any of their own music, they don't get a lot of respect, if you will. And a lot of people don't believe they'll get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame primarily because they didn't write a lot of their music. So I think that's kind of, but the competitive part, I listen to Casey Kasem's Top 40, and they also do something on the 80s at 8, where they do, according to Billboard's Top 40. And by the way, they were doing 1989 this past week. 1989 was a really, really bad year of music. I mean, it was like, usually like 1982, fantastic. I mean, you could hear everything from Frank Sinatra to Pablo Cruz to the Doobie Brothers. I mean, it was all over the place, but the music was fantastic. A lot of yacht rock stuff was really good. 1989, man, was like White Lion, Winger, Twisted Sister, Vanessa Williams had a hit in 1989. I mean, Enya, you remember Enya, Enya? Enya had a hit. And I mean, they're just playing all these songs from and it was horrible. It was a transitional area of people just didn't know what the hell they were throwing synthesizers and all kinds of drum beat shit. I mean, it was just 1988, 89, really bad music years. Anyway, so I want to throw some bands at you.
Well, real quick, let me make a point to emphasize your point. Jackson Browne, you will never hear him to this day play one of his biggest hits in concert because he hates the song. He was asked by his good friend Cameron Crowe, the producer-director in Hollywood, who had a string of really great movies, really kind of kicked off by Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He asked Jackson Browne to write a song for that movie. That song was Somebody's Baby. Mm-hmm. And he wrote it and submitted it, and it became a monster hit. But he'll tell you in interviews, and he may have mentioned it to you when you interviewed him, he hated that song, but he wrote it specifically for that movie to fit that character. When the lead character, I forgot his name, gets obsessed with the girl at the mall, that song is the accompanying song. It's not even the title song in the movie, but you will never hear him play that in concert because he just thinks the song sucks. It was a number one. Your point. It was a number one hit it's one of my favorite Jackson Browne songs. I'm just telling you. Every time I hear that song, I think that song is great, and because that's a feel good kind of fun song. Yeah, it really is. But your point was so spot on. He writes music that reflects what he's feeling at the time. His two best albums have come after the biggest tragedies in his life. Mm-hmm. His first wife committed suicide, and he wrote and unexpectedly, he'll tell you in interview stuff, he didn't even know she was that unhappy, but he wrote Late for the Sky that's got, I mean, it's just two sides of unbelievable cuts that just go so much to his heart and soul. And then when he was dumped by Hannah, what's her name? Daryl Hannah. Daryl. Yeah, that's Hannah. Right. I couldn't think. Who's now with she's with Neil Young, right? And she's with Neil Young. But she dumped him for John F. Kennedy Jr. She thought she had a shot with him. And they had Jackson Browne and her had all these plans. That's when he came out with the I'm Alive album, which really revived his career. And if you listen to those cuts, I mean, they are just unbelievably personal. And that's the music that he aspires and wants to write. And he's never been very good at just songs for hits. Glenn Frey actually had to finish the song, Take It Easy. Jackson Browne wrote like 3/4 of it and said, I just don't know how to finish this song. And Glenn Frey said, well, let me have a look at it. Glenn Frey finished it. The Eagles recorded it. It became a gigantic hit. That song is written 80% by Jackson Browne. Yep. So, I mean, you've got all those examples, but he's best at writing songs that reflect what he's feeling at the time. And that's what he lives for. And it's really an interesting dynamic. In sports, I don't think you get quite that kind of, you get people that just love their sport and, played to the absolute hill of their ability. I'm watching the hockey playoffs now. Every team seems to have that one player that's just so much better than everybody else, but he makes everybody else better that's playing with him. And, last night, the Edmonton Oilers seemed to be in a hopeless position in their game with the Kings. They scored with 29 seconds left on a setup by Connor McDavid, who's probably the best player in the world, and then won it in overtime. So you get these great stories, but somebody in sports that's great can elevate everybody else. Music, of course, with a band, if you've got a superstar performer, look at Fleetwood Mac, who was just kind of going nowhere. They'd had some commercial success. They had Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, and look what happened. Yep. So I mean, there are correlations, but they're kind of different dynamics in a way. And what were your thoughts of Jackson Browne during his Lawyers in Love part of his? Yeah, that was kind of his. I remember, and he had a song called "The Shape of a Heart," which we played. Beautiful song. Yeah, great song.
But I do remember because he was classic rock and we always played, Doctor My Eyes and, the Loadout Stay and Running on Empty. We always played all those songs. And then when he came out with these other songs and some of them, I call it the Dan Fogelberg Language of Love era, because he had a song called Language of Love, which was kind of a rocker for Dan Fogelberg. And we couldn't figure out whether we should play it or not, because Dan Fogelberg, the same guy was singing Longer Than and Auld Lang Syne, and we could have played the song, but it rocked. And so we played it and it was a big hit. Yeah. But the Lawyers in Love, I call it the Lawyers in Love. At what point, and what was that, 80?
I don't know.
Was that 89?
Yeah, I think it was right at the end of the 80s, so that might fit into your theme. Yeah. He had that time when the things that were most important to him were like a lot of protest songs, and he was all involved, and he was so anti-nuclear power because that was kind of the climate change of that day by the left, that these things are gonna come back to haunt us and ruin our environment, and they're dangerous. And so Jackson Browne was like front and center of the no nukes era, and he wrote a lot of songs. Lawyers in Love was about politicians, really.
Good Lord, that was dude, I'm gonna blow you away. It was 1983.
Oh wow, the early 80s. Okay,
yeah, that was the title track to the album, his seventh album, 1983 in Asylum Records. It was his fourth straight.
Yeah, because he had album. Lives in the Balance in that period too. And Lives in the Balance was all songs about corruption and evil and things in the world. So that was what was most meaningful for him at that part of his life, and that's what he wrote songs about, which is consistent with what I just said. That's why he's in the craft, because he loves it, and that's how he expresses himself. And he's had so much turmoil in terms of his romantic situations that it's been very indicative in his music, and that's why so much of his song is so introspective and so personal that it's always appealed to me, because I kind of feel like I've had kind of a rocky road in that area. So those are things I identify with.
Lawyers in Love. He also had a single called Downtown. Tender is the Night. Remember that? Tender is the Night.
Yep, Tender is the Night. Another great song.
And there was a song that was last on the track, and I've forgotten. Lawyers in Love was only an 8-track album, but For a Rocker, which was another song that we played.
For a Rocker, that's a good one.
This is fantastic. So 1983. Wow. I love that stuff.
His song catalog at this point is just unbelievable.
It's ridiculous.
You go to a Jackson Browne concert, particularly his solo acoustic ones, and the people just yell out in between songs. They'll yell out like 50 different songs. Literally. Yeah. And he just looks at him like, dude, I haven't played that song since 1979. And, so, I mean, when you get that kind of prolific catalog, people want to hear their favorites, and it's demanding for the performer. But every once in a while he'll go, hey, that's a pretty good idea. And he'll just crank it in there. He goes, now I might need some help with the lyrics here if I get stuck.
Redneck Friend, my friend, Redneck Friend.
Oh. I told you that's one of my favorites ever here in Birmingham, where I'd never heard him play that song in concert, and he cranked it up in Birmingham. I know that wasn't an accident.
Great song. All right, so I have a list of bands here that I just put together, and just give me a yay or nay. You can talk about them if you want. You can tell me whether you think they should get in the Hall of Fame or whether you think they will eventually. How about that?
All right.
America.
All right. And I'll be honest, there'll be some that you'll say that I'll have a blank look on my face, because I really don't know much about some of them.
I think you're going to know almost all these.
Okay, fact, that's good. That's good. Because you remember you mentioned White Stripes.
Yeah,
I can't tell you anything White Stripes did.
They're a Christian band. Maybe that'll open the door for Christian bands to get in the Rock and Roll.
That's why. Okay. Yeah. And I'm not anti-Christian, but I really don't listen to Christian music.
Well, neither do I. Okay. If it has Jesus in the title, it's going to be a song from the Doobies or from ZZ Top.
I can rock religious songs at church. I don't really need to do that on my leisure time.
Yeah, go to Church of Highlands if you want to rock at church. All right, America.
America, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great hits. Great. I love Sister Golden Hair and many others. America, Highway. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know
what a dragon lizard in the air is, but that's okay.
I don't know why they're not in. That's one of those things. And I normally then when they have like list of artists that aren't in, like snubs, I don't even know why they wouldn't be in. The Scorpions.
I don't know if they're really notable enough. I mean, you might have a counter to that. I would say for me, no.
They are still touring. The Klaus Mountain they're still on the road. I listen, if you can do something, if you're still on the road, and you're still doing stuff in your 70s, and you're still knocking out. That's Hall of Fame material.
You just changed my opinion.
To me, no doubt.
That's another one I probably wouldn't be a big supporter of, but I'm kind of on the fence there.
Here's an interesting one: Bryan Adams.
I think so. I do too. I think Bryan Adams was not only had some hits, but he just had a different style, and I just love his lyrical ability. There's so many Bryan Adams songs that I think are really good.
BTO.
Yeah, I tell you what, I think they made a big impact, and you talk about rocking it. They were really
taking care of business has been used so many times for so many businesses. I mean, I would put them in just for that one song. That's a great song.
Yeah, I think absolutely.
This to me is a no-brainer, but again, it's got to be 25 years ago or not. Boston.
Boston definitely is a Hall of Fame band. When did their debut album come out?
The first album was 1970. Was it 73?
Yeah, so it's unconscionable there now.
I think they've only had the one, and they had the second one. And
that was it.
Don't look back. And then they had the third album that came out when we were here. Okay. Yeah, and it had Cool the Engines. It had their only number one hit, Amanda. Which was on there. I remember playing. It was a really slow piece of crap. I remember.
I was going to say they had a lot better song. I can't believe Amanda went to number one. Yeah,
but they went like 16, 17 years between the second album and the third. And they were one of those bands where they didn't care. Tom was out there making amplifiers and getting patents for things like that, and they didn't. Yep. They could give a rip. And of course, the record label was like, you need to come out with something new. They really didn't care.
More Than a Feeling. There's so many great songs from them.
Yeah, and More Than a Feeling, man. When you heard it. I wish I could remember what it sounded like the first time I heard it, because when you heard that, you knew you were hearing something that was
big time.
That had never been. It was like a lot of people say Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit. The first time they heard it, they were like, "Whoa, this is something different here." Phil Collins. How the hell
Phil Collins is not in the Hall of Fame?
He's not. He's in Genesis, but I mean, dude, there was one point I saw something a couple of weeks ago. There was one point. And I think it was in 1986 or something like that, where at some point for almost a year straight, there was a Phil Collins song on a radio station somewhere in the United States.
I believe it. I think he was the biggest solo act in that era that there was. I can't believe he's not in.
Yeah, that's crazy. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Now,
come on.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash are in, but Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young aren't in.
That's absurd.
Yeah.
Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young played Woodstock and just completely defined that event. That their set at Woodstock, when they were basic unknowns, launched all of their careers. And I wonder if Neil Young has some of the Shedeur Sanders kind of taint, because he's not exactly a real engaging figure. He's probably pissed a lot of people off. So I'm wondering if they're penalizing CSNY because of Neil Young.
Man, somebody's got a picture of Shedeur or something. I don't know what the heck. And
that's another.
I was thinking about doing a show on that today, and certainly the prank of the phone call coming from the imaginary GM.
How bad is that?
Well, now the NFL is going to have to go and do an investigation. I'm like, come on. I mean, I'm not saying that's like me calling you at 3:00 in the morning and asking me if your refrigerator's running. Will you better catch it? I'm not saying it's that kind of prank, but for someone.
Or calling the convenience store. We used to call convenience stores. Do you have Prince Edward in the can? Well, goddamn, let him out.
And it's still fucking funny. It's still funny. John Fogerty.
John Fogerty's not in the Hall of Fame.
No. I mean, he's in for CCR, but he's not in for John Fogerty.
Well, see, all of this, John Fogerty had a illustrious individual career. He should be in for CSR, but he needs to be recognized individually as well.
Grand Funk Railroad.
No kidding. I mean, all these are shocking me.
Yeah.
They at their time they were really groundbreaking. I mean, I think they should be in.
One of my favorite bands, the Guess Who.
Oh, good grief.
Burton Cummings, yeah. I mean, they were, yeah.
Yeah, the Guess Who. I still, as I sit out in my yard in my lounge chair with my headphones, Guess Who songs come on all the time, and I sing along. Everybody in the neighborhood benefits from that. That's one of the best things of buying out here in Trussville. You get free Keefer concerts.
He'll never make it in because he's rubbed so many people the wrong way, particularly political. And I'll never forget, he played out at Oak Mountain Amphitheater. I brought him on stage, and he was known to cuss quite a bit on stage. And the city of Pelham told his management that if he drops the F-bomb on stage, they will shut the show down.
Wow.
And it was only because, of course, everyone was dropping F-bombs on stage, but they knew that he notoriously did it. And they said, listen, we were going to get you a profanity thing like that. That was Ted Nugent. And Ted Nugent got on stage. He got on stage, and it was about 3 seconds into it, he said, you know what? I don't give a about this, blah, 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 blah. And there was no shutting down that show because they would have gotten killed. There were some people there. But he came out, of course, at the end of a show. He would hang a guitar out, and he would get a bow and arrow, and it would be on fire, and he'd shoot the guitar from across the room. Should Ted Nugent be in the Hall of Fame? Right?
I think so. He was another groundbreaking performer. Now people don't like him because of his conservative politics.
He was supposed to play here just a couple of months ago, and they had to shut the show. He was going to play down in Avondale at some small place. Yeah, I think it was Avondale. What was it, Avondale Cafe or whatever? And they got such a back rub from people saying, dude, I can't believe we'll never come to your bar again. And I mean, first I was thinking Ted Nugent playing the Avenue because it's like a 200. It was like the Iron City or something. I was like,
unbelievable.
Wow. Sammy Hagar.
Sammy Hagar should be in the Hall of Fame. I'm sure he's in he's another one of those situations. I'm trying to think what was Sammy's biggest individual hit.
I Can't Drive 55 was probably one of his most notorious songs. He had Fall in Love Again. And of course, he did all those things with Van Halen when they got together.
But as an individual, I guess I would say that maybe's a little questionable. With Van Halen, they are front and center.
To me, if you open up the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and put a picture of Sammy Hagar in the front door, it would be perfect. He is what rock and roll is, and he's kept it clean for the most part. He's written great music. He's worked with other people. He's full of it. But here's one: Jethro Tull. Were you a Jethro Tull fan?
I love Jethro Tull music. I don't know a lot about the band. I'm surprised that they haven't been recognized because I imagine their string of hits would be qualifying. They talk about a different sound and going different directions. Jethro Tull was a defining act as well.
I want to throw a little piece of trivia out there. They won in 1989 the Grammy for the best heavy metal album of the year.
Oh, wow. That 1989 was quite an illustrious year.
That should tell you how weird that year was. I'll never forget. Yeah, because Jethro Tull's nothing near heavy metal, but they had an album called Farm in the Freeway. It got nominated, and it won heavy metal album of the year. Kansas.
Oh, I think Kansas should be in. They were just a whirlwind hit. I was in Atlanta, and they based out of Atlanta during that time, so we saw a lot of Kansas concerts early on, and their sound and their string of hits absolutely qualifies them.
What about Meatloaf?
Meatloaf should be in the Hall of Fame.
I know, right?
Just for Paradise on the Dashboard Lights, which is one of the greatest anthems in music history.
I totally agree with you.
And to see him perform that live, Tony, I'm sure you saw him live at some point. To see him and I think her name was Carla DeVito perform song, that was beyond music. That was performance art.
Every time he sang, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. He was the Joe Cocker of the 70s. Yeah, he would be
sweating. All that hair would just be dripping when he got to the point, and just think about the genius of that song, getting Phil Rizzuto going, okay, this kid's really something. He's rounding second. He's heading for third. He's going to try to score. It's going to be close. Here's the play at the plate. He is. Stop right there. I mean, what a song. Yeah. I can listen to that song over and over. And 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad is still one of the great songs of all time.
He also wrote a bunch of songs, and I only know this because my son, but he wrote a lot of Disney music. Go pull up.
I'm not surprised.
Go pull up Meatloaf and Disney music, or they repurposed a lot of his music for stuff. Because he wrote stuff that was epic. I mean, it would go on forever and ever and ever.
And when his role in the movie Fight Club, he was phenomenal. Yeah. This guy was so talented in so many ways. He needs to be recognized in the Entertainment Hall of Fame, let alone put him in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, for God's sake.
Got a chance to meet him out at the Grammys back in 1990. Out in LA.
Oh, wow.
And I was totally unprepared. I always say OPE, on time, prepared, and engaged. And I was none of them. I wasn't on time. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know anything about Meatloaf. Back in that time, I was 20 something years old, and totally he basically said, listen, you don't have anything for me. You don't have a question for me that I even want to answer. And he's got up and walked away from me. I said, you know what, Mr. Meatloaf, you're right. Gee. You're correct. Kip, do the Monkees deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
That is the ultimate band that didn't write any of their music, didn't write any of their lyrics. They were basically a television show that they had to come up with some kind of, but I will say this, that group of performers, Peter Tork, Mickey Dolenz, Michael Naismith, Davy Jones, they formed, although they were as much actors as musical performers, the sound and the popularity. When I was in elementary school, I was a Monkees fanatic, and people still remind me that I knew way back in the 4th grade about me introducing the Monkees. We had moved from Washington, D.C. to the deep South in Atlanta. I was the new Yankee kid at the school. It was right when Atlanta was starting to become a big melting pot, but it was still mostly natives in the mid 60s. I think I was in 3rd grade when we moved there, and people still give me credit for the Monkees. So sentimentally for me, the Monkees are in the Keefer Hall of Fame, but the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I think, might be a little bit of a stretch.
They may, just because, and I want to say that Neil Diamond, didn't he write a bunch of their stuff?
Yes, he did.
Last Train.
He did. Tommy Boyce, yeah. Neil Diamond. They had big time people behind that show.
I want to say, I'm sure they have somewhere in the Hall of Fame, there's something that recognizes their work. Because it was the Milli Vanilli of our time. It's like, hey, look, and if you remember, they got these 4 cats together that didn't know how to play. This is the amazing part of the story about the Monkees that people realize. None of them played musical instruments. So when they got up there and they started the TV show, they were doing because their boyish looks and they were funny and they were comedians, blah, 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 blah. And they, of course, everything was in fast motion. And I remember it was one of my favorite TV shows growing up. Seeing them pushing the bed down the street and, of course, running up to the shoreline and running back. I mean, it was just, I can remember it in my head. And so after the 2nd year of production of that show, someone said, listen, if you guys want to keep doing this, we're going to have to go on the road. And if we're going on the road, y'all need to play some instruments. And they all learned how to play musical instruments. I don't know about
Michael
you.
Naismith became a really good guitarist, a really good lead guitar.
And I've tried to pick up a guitar. I've tried to take lessons. It pisses me off when someone picks up a guitar and can teach themselves chords and stuff. I've never been able to do that. It just pisses me off. I wish I could. I played the trumpet for 9 years. That's it. But to be told, hey, listen, you need to learn how to play an instrument, or else it's done. That takes a lot of chutzpah.
It does. And Mickey Dolenz became a credible drummer. The Davy Jones always just the tambourine. Peter Tork was on the bass guitar. They made it work. I mean, I give them a ton of credit for that. That's something I hadn't thought about. Because Michael Naismith later did his own individual recordings.
He produced a lot of stuff too. He produced for a lot of people.
He really did. He had a significant contribution to the music industry.
Davy always got the women. Motley Crue,
unbelievable. That pisses me off. Little English, 140 pounds soaking wet. Give me a break. Who's next?
He was the shortest dude.
That's what's wrong with America, Tony Curry.
When he stood next to Michael, man, he was like a foot shorter than Michael Nesmith.
And Nathan's like 6'6".
Yeah, and he got all the women just because that damn he had the boyish looks. Motley Crue.
Oh, the crew's got to be in.
Yeah.
They got to be in the Destructive Hall of Fame or the Hell-Raising Hall of Fame. Why not the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Another one that no one talks about, Robert Plant. I mean, I don't know how the hell Robert Plant's. I know Zeppelin's in for sure, but I don't know how as a solo artist, particularly with the music he's done, certainly with the bluegrass stuff. And he's still on the road too. He look. By the way, he looks like Robert. He hadn't lost his hair. He looks like Robert. I got a chance to bring him on stage and have a really nice conversation with him. And one of the nicest guys. I'll never forget. I met him backstage, but he actually called me on the air, and he was out of breath. And of course, when Robert Plant's out of breath, you don't know what's going on. And I had said, "What's going on?" And he had just gotten off the tennis courts with Jimmy Page. Jimmy and Robert like to play. And I was like, man, if you had told me back in the 70s that Jimmy Page and Robert Plant like to play tennis every afternoon at 3 o'clock, I would have told you you're crazy.
Yeah. That's
Sting.
crazy. That is insane.
Sting.
Who? Oh,
Sting.
Sting's, I'm sure he's in with the Police. There's so many of these guys, but Sting also went on to have a fantastic solo career. Yep. So if you're gonna do this, I was just getting ready to ask you the question, and you give me the perfect example there. Do you think guys get penalized because they've already been recognized in their bands that they're known for?
Absolutely,
You've named a dozen of them that absolutely had individual careers that would be in if they had never been in those bands.
And that's true. But you look at a guy like Eric Clapton, who's in 3 times. He's in with Derek and the Dominoes. He's in as a solo artist, and he's also in with. Is he in with Blind? Who else is he in with? I think he's in 2 or 3 different times. Stevie Nicks is another one of those that could be. Here's these next 2 bands. Are in the foreign league. I said the foreign league because they're the Foreigner band. Everyone said if Foreigner gets in, these 2 bands will get in. If Foreigner doesn't get in, they'll never get in because it's at any given time in the 80s, you could see these 2 bands touring together, and it felt like they played Birmingham like 16 times a year. But REO Speedwagon and Styx. The criteria is just an album of 25 years, but is it artistic success or is it popularity and sales success? Because both those bands blew it out of the water. Did Mr. Roboto kill it for Styx?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I mean, to me, Mr. Roboto was so bad that people like to listen to it now. I mean, when you hear Mr. Roboto, people they want to hear it. It's such a bad, it's the Ishtar of rock and roll. It's so bad they want to hear that song. And when it came out, people were like, it was like the new Coke. It's like, what the hell are you doing? It sounds not like Styx. It was horrible, terrible.
Yeah. I'm only familiar with it because my sons, I ignored it at the time because it was just lunacy. But Case, when he was in his teenage music period, got into that somehow, and they laughed at it because it was so bad. But they liked listening to it because it was so bad.
2 more, Dan Fogelberg. Yeah.
Dan Fogelberg is an absolute yes for me. One of the best singer-songwriters and just most personable guys. I got to see him very late in his tragic demise. One of his last shows at Chastain Park in Atlanta, already had his diagnosis and knew he was, at the end of his ability to perform, but somehow reached down deep, and just one of the greatest shows I ever saw. I was privileged to see Dan probably 7 or 8 times over that 20-year span. But I just the other day tracked about 15 Dan Fogelberg deep cuts, and just the ability to write beautiful lyrics, romantic lyrics, which is something that I'm a hopeless, hapless romantic, Tony. That's what I am. And so Dan Fogelberg is one of the all-time greats.
I've got several friends of mine that play guitar, and I'll always request Dan Fogelberg. They won't play it, and they'll say it's too hard. And I'm like, really? They're like, you, dude, his music was so stinking hard.
Complicated.
And don't disappoint yourself, because sometimes if you want to hear sometimes when I hear a song, I want to see what it sounds like live because I want a different version of it. And if you go pull up Dan Fogelberg, there's not a lot of live Dan Fogelberg things that I would preface because they're filmed on a phone and it's just off. It's just not right. I'm sure he's got a live album out somewhere that behooves him and makes him sound as good as he actually did. But he was really hard to say. It was a really difficult song to play. And Joe Walsh, finally, Joe Walsh, our good friend Joe.
Yeah, Joe Walsh, a dynamic performer, great guitarist. I think absolutely he should be in the Hall of Fame. Hey, if you ever have a bad breakup, go listen to the Dan Fogelberg, not a hit, but the song The Last Farewell. It's the best tearful breakup song. One of my favorite lines in all-time music. He says, "And once I believed that you and I were the two who could defy the fickle gods and went out against the odds and go on forevermore." Wow. I mean, that's just poetry, Tony. That's just the essence. It's so awesome.
Big show coming up on Saturday, my friend. ABC 3340's starting lineup. Kentucky Derby weekend. Man, cannot wait.
On a musical note on that, do you know one of the great horse owners and enthusiasts for horse racing of all time was Toby Keith?
Really?
Toby Keith, shortly before his death, invested in a newborn colt that is unbelievably, a year after his death, is running and achieving Toby Keith's dream to have a horse in the Kentucky Derby. This horse is called Judgment Rendered. He'll be number 15 on Saturday. Okay. He's a long shot, but he's got some pretty powerful connections upstairs that might prompt him to run a...
That's the kind of stuff I like to bet on. I know a lot of people do too. That's pretty cool. I did not know
Judgment Rendered, number 15, owned by Toby Keith's descendants or whatever. And if you read any kind of bios, Toby Keith dreamed of being a horse owner in the Kentucky Derby and missed it by 1 year. So really the kind of story it's just, you can't make that stuff up.
To go back to one of our artists we just mentioned, Dan Fogelberg had this little song called Run for the Roses, which was just a fantastic song too. So we'll wrap it up. Check out the show. Big Derby Day coming up on Saturday. Have yourself a wonderful week. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
All right, Tony. Great fun.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.